Price cuts on the US housing market just got even bigger. Sellers are now starting to wake up, with many of them frantically reducing the price before things get even worse. Like on this listing in California, where the owner bought it for $700,000 last year and is now selling it at a nearly 20% discount in late 2023. And even after that discount, the house is still sitting on the market, with examples like this cropping up all across America, particularly in states like Texas, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona, which have the highest share of price cuts in America. And the reason that sellers are now finally starting to wake up is because they are facing more competition from new listings heading to the market, as well as a big collapse in home buyer demand. With data from Bloomberg showing that house sales in America have collapsed down to their lowest level since 1994. Because even with some of these big price cuts that I know a lot of you are seeing out there, the affordability levels are still horrible. Even if a seller cuts the price by 20% on a listing, like this seller on a house in Dallas did, they've cut the price from $310,000 in July to $250,000 in late October. Those price cuts are coming as mortgage rates keep going up, with the 30-year fixed mortgage rate now hovering around 7.9%. So the average home buyer isn't getting too excited actually about these price cuts, because they do the math and figure out that they still have to pay $3,000, $4,000, even $5,000 a month in terms of mortgage interest and taxes, and that's just not doable for most Americans. Because the amount of money you need to earn in America to buy a house is now around $111,000 per year household income. That's taking the typical house payment of $2,800 a month, annualizing it to $33,000 a year, and saying, what income do you need so that's not more than 30%? Well, that income is now $111,000, and Americans, they just don't have that money because the median household income is only $77,000. And so as long as the income needed to buy a house is way higher than the median household income, we're going to see rock bottom buyer demand, and we're likely to see prices decline more into the future. Because one aspect of the housing market that is shifting right now, and that you need to pay attention to as a home buyer real estate investor, is distressed selling. We are starting to see more distressed selling pop up, where the owner of the house, whether it be an individual or an investor, is now starting to experience liquidity needs and is now feeling the pressure to convert their house into cash. And this is exactly what's going on this listing in Murrieta, California I showed you guys earlier. The owner bought it 16 months ago for $700,000. Now they're selling it for $580,000. Well, why are they doing that? Why are they selling it a near 20% loss? Well, if we look on PropWire, we can see that this owner actually has a $700,000 mortgage on the house at an estimated 6% interest rate. And so that owner is listing the house for $130,000 less than the mortgage. Clearly, there is something going on in their life which is causing them to need to sell the house and get out. Maybe they got laid off, maybe they ran out of money, I don't know, and I don't want to speculate, but what I do know is that more and more Americans are feeling this pinch. More and more Americans are running out of money. Their savings buffers from the pandemic, they are evaporated, with Bloomberg reporting that only the richest 20% of Americans still have excess pandemic savings. You can see in particular the excess savings has dwindled most for people on the 0 to 40th percentile of income. Meanwhile, the 40th to 80th percentile is about 2% below on inflation adjusted savings. So most households are now poorer in terms of their liquid savings compared to where they were before the pandemic, which is a huge problem, because now that the excess savings has dwindled, we're going to see more and more importance placed on how much money Americans are saving on an ongoing basis. What percentage of Americans' paycheck month by month are they saving right now? What do you guys think? What percentage of the average American's paycheck is going into savings? Well, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the personal savings rate dropped to 3.4% in September 2023, meaning that the average American only saved 3.4% of their income. That's literally close to the lowest level of all time. Their savings has dropped right back down to what it was during the peak of the last bubble in 2006, 2007, before we had the worst crash of all time. And so expect to see more distress pop up in the housing market due to these low savings rates, and expect to see even more foreclosures pop up. More people defaulting on their mortgages, and then the banks moving to take the homes and repossess the homes and list them on the market. That's another trend we're beginning to see more of over the last couple months. The foreclosures have surged up to a level now that's approaching what we saw before the pandemic. So according to Atom Data Solutions, you can see this uptick in foreclosures in the last quarter. We're now at or above where we were in 2020, with metros like Houston, Atlantic City, Cleveland, Bakersfield, California, and Columbia, South Carolina seeing the highest rates of foreclosure. Additionally, a metro area like Las Vegas is in the crosshairs of this foreclosure crisis. We're seeing a big uptick of foreclosures in Nevada. If you go on Zillow, you can see these foreclosures even. On a house like this that's listed in North Las Vegas for $470,000, you scroll down, you can see information on the foreclosure. The bank took it in September 2022 and has now listed it 1 year later in October 2023. Here's another property that's a foreclosure in Vegas. This is in Summerlin to the west, which is actually a pretty nice neighborhood. The home went into default again December of last year. The bank took it over in April of this year, and you can see actually that the value of this house, according to Zillow, has collapsed. It peaked at $474,000 last year, and now it's down to $375,000, a 20% decline in value in just 16 months. And I'm going to do a more in-depth video on foreclosures in the next couple weeks. So if you want to see that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. But really, what you got to understand, everyone, is that this housing market is in a free fall right now. And a lot of people actually don't want you to know that or understand that, because when I look at the mainstream news reporting on the housing market, I still see so many people acting like there is no housing downturn. I still see so many people referencing like old data in terms of saying home prices are still going up. Like in this article from Bankrate, which is titled, "Is the Housing Market About to Crash?" What the experts are saying, they say that much to the chagrin of would-be buyers, property prices just keep rising. And they talk about some data from Case-Shiller Home Price Index, which is a lagging indicator. They talk about some data from the National Association of Realtors. And they quote Lawrence Yun, the chief economist from the National Association of Realtors, saying the housing recession is essentially over. They quote another person from a mortgage firm who says, "You're not going to see home prices decline. There's just not enough inventory." Furthermore, they say, "Is the housing market going to crash?" No, there are more buyers than sellers. That means a meaningful price decline can't happen. They quote someone at a title insurance company who says there are more people than housing inventory. It's Econ 101. They quote another person, a broker from Remax, saying that there's been an entire generation of pent-up demand. He says we're in this fascinating position of tremendous demand and too little inventory. And not surprisingly, everyone that article quoted was either a realtor or worked for a realtor association or was a mortgage broker or worked for a title insurance company. And this is what I want you guys to just pay attention to. If you're a buyer or real estate investor trying to understand the market and you read these articles, pay attention to who the quotes are coming from. Because if the quotes are coming from people who have a vested interest in seeing home prices go up and who make fees off people buying homes, understand that their incentives are aligned with trying to FOMO you into buying a house and making you think that waiting is a bad idea. And ultimately, a lot of these people, they just recycle the same broken narratives over and over again, like that guy who said that there's just all this pent-up housing demand. Well, if there was all this pent-up housing demand, why would mortgage applications to buy a house, my favorite weekly indicator of housing demand, why would this be down at the lowest level since the mid-1990s? Why would mortgage applications to buy a house be down 60% from the pandemic peak and down almost 50% from pre-pandemic levels? Why would that be the case if there was so much pent-up demand? Because clearly there isn't pent-up demand. People have no desire to buy a house and spend 40% of their gross income on their house payment, which ultimately is what's required in today's market to participate. And a lot of the people in the real estate industry, they don't understand this. They're not connected to what the average American feels. The average American knows the current housing market is in a massive bubble and wants no part of it. Data from Fannie Mae showing that a record 84% of Americans think it's a bad time to buy a house. Let that sink in, everyone. 84 out of 100 say it's a bad time to buy a house, while only 16% say it's a good time to buy a house. And I also just quote my own experience here, folks. I'm 34 years old. I'm supposedly in prime home buying age. A lot of my friends are in prime home buying age, but none of us have any interest. I can't tell you how little desire I personally have to buy a house for myself right now. Like, it's just not even close to on my radar screen, nor is it close to being on the radar screen for so many millennials who go on Zillow and look at these homes and look at these house payments and say, this is ridiculous. This makes no sense. And until the prices come down and come way down, we are not going to see home buyer demand return. And I still see people say this thing that, once mortgage rates come down a little bit, like the buyers are going to flood back in, like Barbara Corcoran, the woman on Shark Tank who founded Corcoran Group. She just came out and said that now's a great time to buy a house and that she thinks home buyer demand is going to surge once mortgage rates come down. But what's important to understand is that mortgage rates today are not actually that high. With the real mortgage rate, which takes the mortgage rate and subtracts the inflation rate, measuring 4.1% in 2023. So that's taking a 7.8% mortgage rate, subtracting 3.7% inflation. You can see this real mortgage rate, it's up from where it was during the pandemic when we saw negative real rates, but this is actually well within the long-term norms over the last 40 years for real mortgage rates. And so it's not the mortgage rates which are the problem, it's the home prices that are the problem, because the real home prices, inflation-adjusted home prices, they are still near the highest level of all time. So we need to see real home prices come down. That's what's going to deliver real affordability gains and deliver demand back into the market, is more of these price cuts. And if you want proof of this, look no further than the home builders. The home builders who I've talked a lot about on this channel over the last year. The home builders are actually a group of people who are much more in tune with the demand dynamics in the market, and the home builders have actually been very flexible in terms of adjusting home prices and giving home buyers incentives to buy a house. With the median sale price for a new house in America now down almost 16% from its peak. So the builders, they've cut the price by about 16%. In addition, according to reporting from Wolf Street, these builders are giving about $35,000 in incentives on top of these price cuts, with these incentives being driven by mortgage rate buy downs, which in some cases lower the mortgage rates all the way to 5.75%. And as a result, the builders are having some success. New home sales bounced in September to the highest level we've seen since early 2021. Now, I think that bounce in new home sales is not going to be sustainable, because we can see the buyer traffic at builder sites is still very, very low, suggesting that eventually the sales are going to drop back down. However, what the builders are showing is that if you cut the price by a decent amount and give enough incentives, you can lure buyers back into the market, something that existing homeowners are now only starting to realize with these bigger and bigger price cuts. Like on this listing in Oklahoma City, this is a 3-bed, 3-bath house, 2,200 square feet. This was actually a home flip and renovation. You can see the house looks pretty nice. It's now on the market for $375,000 after originally being listed for $500,000 in March, which is a 24% total reduction. With a similar level of desperation setting in on this next listing outside of Austin, Texas, in a suburb called Dripping Springs. This is a 4-bed, 3-bath, 2,800 square feet. It was just built 3 or 4 years ago. It's on the market for $700,000, price which has been cut by $150,000 and is now 20% lower than its original list of $850,000. And no doubt, one of the prime areas where we're seeing price cuts is Austin, Texas, and Texas in general, everyone. The Texas housing market is in a bit of a free fall right now. The inventory is skyrocketing, the price cuts are skyrocketing, the buyer demand and competition is way down. And really, this is a lesson in why you can't just assume that, a big boom in migration in jobs is going to sustain a housing market forever. Because when I lived in Texas in 2020, 2021, and 2022, I lived in Austin and Dallas. All I heard was people say locally that there's so many people moving in and that there's going to be no decline in home prices as a result, and that there's just so many corporations piling in and so many jobs. But folks, very clearly, that's not sustainable. You can't sustain an excess level of inbound migration. Eventually, it comes crashing down like it is in Austin. With Redfin now reporting that Austin is losing home buyers to other cities for the first time on record. Take a look at this, everyone. Redfin tracks data on where people are searching for a house, and they noted that in February 2021, Austin was the #1 city in America for having more people search into the city than want to move out of the city. But now in September 2023, Austin had a net outflow of 441, meaning that more people in Austin searched to leave than more people outside of Austin searched to move in. Redfin notes that this is a stark reversal for Austin, with Austin now falling out of favor due to several reasons. Number one is rising home prices, which are now starting to come down significantly, but Austin lost its affordability appeal. Additionally, some home buyers who moved to Austin are leaving. Austin Redfin agents report that some formerly remote workers moved back to their home city after being called back to the office, with a few others moving back after trying Austin and realizing it's not a long-term fit. That was my situation situation, everyone. I moved to Austin in August 2020, right when everyone else did, and I left in October 2021 because I realized it wasn't the city for me. And when I left Austin, I actually did a video here on YouTube talking about how I was predicting this housing crash and migration crash in Austin. And so that's the important thing to remember about remote work. There's nothing about Austin that makes it good for remote work. People just happen to choose to move here over the last couple of years because it was cool. But now that it's expensive and the quality of life's going down, these people are going to move out. And based off this, I think home prices in Austin have 30 to 40% downside over the next couple of years. It's going to get very ugly in Austin's housing market. And ultimately, this is a warning to anyone who lives in a city that's like Austin. Like if you live in a city where all these people and jobs moved in and all these home builders built homes, and there's this notion that everything's going to keep going up because of all the people coming in, your city could face a similar fate to Austin, Texas. I'm talking areas like Phoenix and Las Vegas, Tampa, Charlotte, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Boise, Salt Lake City. These are all areas that are now seeing a pretty pronounced slowdown in their local housing markets, with buyer demand going back to more normal levels or even below more normal levels, which is causing some sellers to now freak out. And you can see even in the cities that are still gaining the most people, like Sacramento and Las Vegas, according to this Redfin search data, the amount that they're gaining is significantly less than it was a year ago. So pretty much everywhere, even still the top migration destinations, the migration levels are cut in half. Like in Tampa, they're cut in half. In Miami, the migration figures are cut by almost 60%, which is one reason why we are seeing inventory start to pile up in some of these areas, particularly in Miami and Southeast Florida. What we're seeing in Miami is what I call a double-barreled increase in inventory, where the number of homes for sale, the blue line, is surging back up, with additionally the number of homes for rent also surging at the same time. So when you have the number of homes for sale going up and the number of homes for rent going up at the same time, you know demand has dropped off. You know things are not the same as they were during the pandemic. And Miami is a metro, as well as other parts of Florida, where we are finally going to start to see prices go down over the next several months. Now, to be clear, everyone, there's still a lot of wood to chop on the housing market for you as a buyer and investor to feel like it makes sense for you to buy. We still need to see inventory increase by a lot more. Inventory is going up by a lot right now over the last couple months. It needs to increase even more into the future. We need to see more seller distress. We need to see more corporate investors sell, like the owner of this property in Phoenix. This property is owned by a Wall Street investor. They bought this property in June 2022 for $395,000. Now they're selling in October 2023 at an 11% loss. We're going to have to see even more of that build up over the next 3 to 6 months to unlock the substantial price declines that are required to bring affordability back into the market. So this is just the start, everyone. This is the housing market working in an incremental fashion, as it always does during housing downturns. Additionally, one thing I'm going to be tracking, and that you guys need to be tracking as well, are the month-by-month inventory figures, because this is going to be very important heading into December and January. What's going to happen to inventory? Are we going to see it continue go up, and are we going to see it potentially stabilize, or are we going to see inventory collapse back down like it did last year? Because if inventory collapses back down due to a lack of sellers listing their homes, then potentially in 2024, the housing market could have another rally. Additionally, we also want to track buyer demand, the percentage of listings that are pending. We can see pending listing percentage has collapsed, indicating the buyers are out of the market. How is this pending listing percentage going to trend in future months? Those are data points that I track in my preliminary inventory analysis that I released to my channel members here on YouTube. I actually just did a video covering 55 large counties in America, showing data on homes for sale, homes for rent, the pending percentage, and all these different counties. If you want access to this real-time data, hit the join button below and become a channel member. I do one video per week for my channel members where I cover exclusive data and housing market topics. If you want to be on the cutting edge of what's happening in the housing market, hit that join button, become a channel member. The cost is $4.99 a month.